Welcome back on Punchline. Now, the BBI conversation has been eliciting mixed reactions across many Kenyans, but a big part of this conversation that has been lost for quite some time is the youth. Where do they come in? What role do they play? And joining me tonight is Alex Matere, who's a BBI youth convener. So we'll be discussing how the youth have been included in this process. Good evening, Alex.
Thank you so much, Alan. Good evening to you.
Nice. Thank you for joining us right here. So even before we begin tonight's conversation, let's just start by having a look at this particular clip.
We should also be wary of the political class. And as the youth of this country, we've experienced the politicians who have mastered the art of conning, conniving, confusing, and taking advantage of our youth and cutting corners with their future. We are here today to give them notice. We've seen some of them who are parading inventions that happened during the 16th century of a one-wheel machine. And we are telling them this morning that the 16th century inventions cannot be used to solve the challenges of the 21st century.
All right, Alex, I believe you've watched yourself on that particular video. So let's just begin by trying to understand who were these sentiments directed to, and where did you even get the boldness to utter such in such a forum?
Thank you so much, Alan. Like I said during the launch of the final BBI document in Bomas, I was speaking on behalf of the young people of our country, many of whom are disillusioned because they feel that sometimes government has deliberately or by lack of that deliberation in terms of policy and legal framework has disenfranchised them, and they feel that some of the political players, especially the political class, are actually taking advantage of the young people. And the political class, a part of them, they are not seriously concentrating on uplifting or rather changing the perspective and the future of our young people. Rather than having policy frameworks, legal frameworks, or programs that are spearheaded by government that are deliberately targeting the uplifting of the young people, they're engaging us on hit-and-run economic policies, they're engaging us on tokenism, they're engaging us on politics that is meant to make use of the young people, either use them or misuse them for their own political ends. And that's why when I stood on that particular platform on Bomas, I thought that given our responsibility of speaking on behalf of 75% of our population, then it was my cardinal responsibility to put to notice the political class that has been an impediment to the achievement of the vision and the dreams of the young people of our country.
All right, very well said. Now, you are a BBI youth convener, which basically means that you're responsible for sensitizing the youth on this particular document. But a lot of youth have complained that they weren't involved in coming up with this document right from the early stages. Now, as a convener, was the public participation for the youth as substantial as it should have been from the word go?
I think from where I sit, and having been also actively participated in the entire process of the BBI, I think this is one of the most processes where we have had public participation at a very high level. We had the task force going through, or rather across the 47 counties, and it was an open platform where everybody with an interest or a perspective or a view in regards to the 9-point agenda that had been enumerated by the President together with the Right Honorable Prime Minister were given an opportunity to sit before the Commission and either give verbal presentation, and at some point there were also an opportunity for them to email the task force with their own with their opinions or their perspective in as far as BBI was concerned. So for me, I think it was an open process. I think it was very participatory. I think the public had an opportunity to contribute to this particular discourse that we are having today. That said and done, during the first phase, they went across the country, and after that, again, there was this validation exercise where the task force sat at KICC and sometimes at Lyco Regency, and I think every person from the political class, from civil society, from CBOs, from Mamboga, from university student leadership, from even high school, or even from book clubs. If you read the document, you'll actually find out that there was even a book club from made up of old people from Rift Valley who took their time and presented their views to the task force. So I think it was a participatory process, it was open, and leading the young people in this particular discourse, we managed to bring together the voices of the young people. We had a conference, and we consolidated the views and perspectives of one people into one formidable document that we later presented to the task force at KICC, and we also participated actively in the validation process.
All right. Now, Alex, you've mentioned what the Secretariat talked about from the word go, that this was an open process. People knew about it, but up to date, we still have young people talking about they didn't know. Everyone is like, I didn't know about this process. Where did it come from? So how do you answer such a young person who says he or she didn't know about this particular process? What were the channels used to communicate this information that this was happening?
One, I think in this time and age, it would be very rare for a young person across the country to say that they don't have access to the social media platforms. And this is one of the areas that the task force took advantage. They had a campaign on the social media, and together also with mainstream media, just advocating or sensitizing the public on the importance of the 9-point agenda that had been envisaged by the President and the Right Honorable Prime Minister Raila Amolo Odinga. And closely say to that is the aspect that definitely there were follow-ups that were done. And when we talk about the young people, we talk about young people in political parties. You know, sometimes we can't talk about young people if we cannot be able to segment them, or rather to group them and cluster them into different actors. We have young people who are actively participating in the political processes. Some of them are in political parties. And you realize that during the presentation of those particular documents, there were young people from their own political parties, let's say their youth chapters or youth pages of their political parties, who were actually represented in terms of presenting the views to the task force. Secondly, there are also youth-centered civil society organizations. These are civil society organizations, or rather NGOs, that work very closely with the young people, and they were able also to get the aspirations and the views of the young people and later consolidate and forward to the task force so that they can actually form what would come to be part and parcel of the final BBI document that was launched.
All right. Yes. Now, very well. The BBI came. It's here with us. The collection of signatures ended and all that. So what we've already established is that the document is here with us. But, of course, we have those who are not for the document as it is right now, still calling for consensus. And I'm talking about the Deputy President alongside his allies. And they've been on the front line saying that this document is being shoved down Kenyans' throats. What do you have to say about people coming from that school of thought?
Of recent, I think we have seen across the country, part of the political class also trying to disparage the BBI process. And yet, this is a discussion that we've had in the last 2 years, since the handshake, since the onset of the handshake at the steps of Harambee House. That said and done, I think it is very unfair for some of the political players in this country to come out and say that they do not support this particular document, and yet there was a window period of more than 2 years for them to be able to meet the task force and also give their views and their perspectives in as far as the 9-point agenda was concerned. And some of them, just to show how dishonest they are, some of them even managed to take flights all the way to Chatham in the UK, and they talked about and addressed issues of the BBI. If you can take a 9-hour flight from here to the UK and address a high-caliber congregation in Chatham, but you do not find 15 minutes to cross over Harambee House to meet the task force at KICC, then definitely that is dishonest of the highest order, and it's actually a betrayal to the people of Kenya who still believe that we have issues as a country, and these issues have to be addressed through so many other avenues, but one of them is the BBI conversation that we are having at this particular moment. Okay,
so let me just engage you in some other interesting topic, and it's on the topic of betrayal. You had the Deputy President say earlier on that he wasn't necessarily involved in the wholesome process of coming up with the document. But on the same side, the President very well mentioned in his address during the launch of the report at the Bomas of Kenya, saying that he was involved. I informed him of every step from the word go. So from where you're sitting from and the Deputy President's flip-flopping in terms of his stand on the BBI, who do you think betrayed the other person?
First and foremost, I think most Kenyans got an opportunity,
Yes.
one, to be informed about the process that culminated to the BBI, the formation of the BBI Secretariat. And His Excellency, the President, came out very openly and clearly to clarify that he involved even his deputy, he involved the former Prime Minister, and most importantly, all the political players were informed on what was happening behind the scenes in terms of putting together this particular team, even before now it became public consumption that we are consuming news that there's a formation of a BBI task force.
Yeah.
That said and done, I think from where I sit, if there's any kind of betrayal,
Yes.
then it's not betrayal that has started now. This is betrayal that started a long time ago.
Okay.
For instance, a bit of it, being a political scientist, I think I can basically look at it from this perspective, that yes, at the onset from 2013, we had Uhuru Ruto.
Yeah.
And they had a very glossy manifesto of the things that they wanted to do for this country. And you can imagine at that particular point, we were actually facing a scenario that was quasi co-presidency, that we had Uhuru and Ruto. When you are talking about government, you are talking about Uhuru Ruto. And they stood up and promised Kenyans that these are a few things that they are going to ensure that is implemented in the 5 years that they are going to take power.
Okay.
Forget about now 2013 to 2016. We come into 2017 and we have a different election again. And Kenyans, because of their wisdom and their trust that they had for this particular system, they decided that they are going to renew the contract that they had with Uhuru Ruto. And that particular time, if you can remember, the mantra was kusema na kutenda.
Yeah.
But it seems one part of that particular union was more of kusema na kutenga rather than kusema na kutenda. And that's where I think there was conflict in terms of the philosophy and also conflict in terms of ideology. Because the president had set aside a few things that he thought, especially the Big Four agenda, that he thought that were very pertinent and imperative
Yes.
to the lives of the common mwananchi. And if we have to take this economy from where it is to a middle income level, then Big Four agenda to him, where he sits together with his administration, he thinks that it's at the center of him delivering the manifesto that he offered to Kenyans.
Okay.
But on the flip side of that, you have a politician who thinks that rather than us having an agenda that is concretized,
Yes.
that is sustainable, that is going to change the aspects or rather the lives of Kenyans in a comprehensive manner, we have one of them who is playing politics of tokenism,
Yes.
who's coming up with hit and run kind of economic policies that are not sustainable. One.
Yeah.
Two, they are not comprehensive. They cannot be able to touch each and every segment of the population that we have. And three, they're actually not based on any legal framework or policy framework that can be implemented by a government. So
right.
from where I sit, I think that is one of the disconnects that we had. That one is talking about kusema na kutenda, and the other one is talking about kusema na kutenga.
Okay.
Then secondly, and also closely linked to that, you realize that this mandate was given by Kenyans. More than 45 million Kenyans at that particular time gave this particular administration the mandate to go and exercise this power on their behalf, just as it is envisaged in the Constitution. But you realize that now the betrayal came in terms of, if you are promised that you are going to deliver 6 stadiums, deliver those 6 stadiums.
Yes.
Let it not be after 2 or 3 years you're coming back and telling me that now we have decided you're not going to deliver 6 stadiums, and yet there are procurement that was done, there was budgeting that was done, that from your own roadside declarations you think that we are not going to deliver 6, we can now go for 12, or we are not going to deliver 3, we are going for 6, devoid of any economic policy or budgetary allocation or even procurement regulations that are closely governed by government. So from where I sit, I think the disconnect is two-faced. One, about the manifesto of Jubilee, and secondly, about the promise that they had for changing the lives of the common mwananchi.
Right. Now let's continue with the discussion, Alex. So let's get to the Deputy President's address that happened on Wednesday. He came out, aired out his sentiments, and he also clearly stated that there is still room for consensus. But one of the key things that he talked about was the timing of this whole constitutional change. I mean, we are dealing with the pandemic right now, and funds they believe should be channeled towards improving the lives of the Kenyan people. So where you're sitting from, I just want to understand, is there any right or is there any truth to what he said in terms of having this at a later date vis-a-vis having it right now?
Probably, Alan, I start by taking you back to the presentation, or rather the speech by the Deputy President at Bomas.
Yes.
And you remember he expressed some reservations about that document, the way it had been written, whether it was on the editorial aspect, or whether it was some articles and some sections that he felt that he was not comfortable with. And after that, there was also news on the media that through the magnanimity of the president, he was able to meet him, and his views were actually received, and the document was even altered. You remember at Bomas, he gave reservations about the formation of the office of the Ombudsman, which it was amended, and actually that particular article that gave rise to the formation of that particular office was actually removed. Yeah. He also gave reservations about the National Police Council. That was also deleted from that particular document. So for me, I don't see the wisdom or lack of it of how he should be in a position again to come up with more demands, to continue derailing this particular process, and to continue giving ultimatums and conditions on his support to this particular conversation that we've been having from today. And from the onset, when this particular process started, you remember the Deputy President in several functions and roadside declarations and political rallies that he had attended, he had made it clear that he is not going to support this kind of conversation. In fact, even if were it not for the president to come out clearly and say that he had actually consulted him in terms of even setting up this particular secretariat, most Kenyans were swayed to think that the deputy president was actually a bystander in this conversation. But the president, because of his wisdom, he thought, and openness to the Kenyans, he thought that it's imperative for him to actually give us the kind of information and the backroom information that he had that culminated to the formation of the BBI task force that set stage for the start of this particular conversation that has actually culminated to us having this particular document, and more importantly for the constitutional amendment bill that we have currently. Secondly, about the timing, there are so many other things that will come up as excuses. But remember, the United States, that is actually worse hit by COVID-19, just had elections about a month or so ago, and yes. I think President Biden, this January, he will be sworn in as the President of the United States together with Kamala Harris as the Vice President. That happened when the United States of America was having more than 100,000 mortality rate at a day.
Yes.
Closer home, Tanzania, even at the peak of this COVID, the COVID trouble, even had elections, and we have a president and a government that is working and responsive even to the affairs of the common mwananchi in Tanzania. Yeah. Uganda currently is actually experiencing a campaign period, and we are seeing Museveni on one side, and our young person, Bobi Wine, on the other side, is also trying his particular best, also mobilizing people and trying to sell his agenda so that he can actually ascend to the presidency and change the lives of the people of Uganda, and most importantly, the young people who also constitute a big percentage of the population of Uganda.
Alex, so just before you continue, just allow me to interject. So I'm asking, part of your job is to persuade the youth and convince people that this is the right document. So I'm coming from a position of that youth who's outside there who really wants to be convinced that spending that money on the referendum right now is a better option vis-a-vis doing it in 2022. How do you convince such a person?
One, is Alan, by recognizing that Kenya has a problem. And I think if we start from that, then we might not be, if we don't start from that, we might not be able to understand why we need BBI. Na vile wanasiasa wanasema, if not now, then it's sasa hivi. One of the reasons why this BBI has to happen before 2022 is the issue of representation.
Yes.
And Kenya, with a population of about 50 million now, we are talking about more than 75% of them being young people. We have 290 constituencies. We have some of the constituencies that are having a quota that is even more than 500,000, and yet the IEBC quota for a constituency is about 132. That basically informs the public and the general mwananchi that we are less represented. And if we are less represented, then we might not have the resources that are required in terms of even championing for the programs and the initiatives at that particular local level to transform the lives of the young people who are at the local level. And that's why we are pushing that BBI has to be implemented as soon as possible, yes, so that before we get to 2022, let us have this excess population that is not represented having their own members of parliament. Secondly, one of the proposals that is very close to my heart in this particular document is the establishment of business incubation centers.
Yes.
This is something that had not been there in a constitution or any legal framework. And this time round, we were able to push those ones of us who are active to have business incubation centers captured in the constitution so that we can have those young people who have talent, who have skills, who have training at that particular local level, in the ward level. They can be able to have a center where they can go and receive training in terms of capacity building, in terms of entrepreneurship, in terms of business development, that even if you have a talent, how are you able to transform that talent and commercialize it so that you can actually earn a living from your talent? That is captured in this particular document. Closely linked to that, to move this economy from where it is to a middle income economy, definitely we depend on SMEs. And true to the fact that as we sit here in this country, at the business level, when you're starting a business, our tax regime is very punitive for startups and youth who are actually starting businesses. And that's why we push to the task force and together with the government to such an extent that the young people who are starting businesses and business startups across the population segment, you can be given a 7-year tax period whereby you are exempted from paying tax. When it comes to business registration, you're also exempted. When it comes to this, to the various fees and charges that are levied by county governments, you're exempted. Because we actually found out that when you're starting a business, even if you have a capital of 100%, you'd end up using 60 or 70% just to be able to comply to the charges and fees that are levied by government and also other governmental agencies before you even are able to raise capital to start your business officially.
All right.
I don't know if I can continue with the gains that we are getting from
No. That is fair enough. So I'm just being told I have less than a minute. So I just want to give you this opportunity, this 60 seconds, quickly, just to get your thoughts on this. Now, there are many things that are being said online. People are talking about rejecting the document. People are talking about doing this. But that is not necessarily what usually happens on the ground. Things might actually be different. And you deal with a lot of young people on the ground levels vis-a-vis what is being said on the social media. As we wind up, what is the reception currently down there?
I think one thing we'll have to put a lot of emphasis is to continue doing civic education, to continue doing sensitization. And we are telling our young people who constitute more than 70% of this population that the future of this country is in your hands. You need to be able to access this document, and now you can actually be able to access it even on your smartphone, on social media platforms. Read this particular document. See what is in it for you. Don't wait for a politician or a charlatan or a demagogue to come and interpret the document in a way that fits his or her own personal and selfish political interest. Be able to read it, analyze it, evaluate it, then after that you can make your own decision. But from where I sit, having been part and parcel of this particular process, and having served the youth even at the university level where I was a student leader and in the NGO world, I can tell you that this document is good and very transformative and progressive for the young people of this country, not just for this generation, but also for the next generation that is coming after us, and the other one that will also succeed that.
All right, Alex, thank you very much for your thoughts on this particular document.